Hey everyone, I'm Nathaniel. I'm the CEO of Future Minds Network, and as a Gen Z educator, I've been really unlocking the endless potential of over 11,000 youth whilst tackling the global unemployment crisis. Outside of Future Minds, I'm an international startup mentor, judge, and I'm a creator and community builder at heart. I run virtual events around the world, connecting thousands of extraordinary humans. And most importantly, I'm an ordinary young person who wanted to make a difference in the world but didn't know how. So when we look at, the future and the future workplaces, one of the most important skills is communication. So in this talk today, I'm going to talk about the importance of communication, the different types of it, and how you can really leverage this as a Gen Zer to make an impact in the world. I think many people think that communication is just about talking, but it's actually much more than that. It's about being able to negotiate and persuade, for one. So you might have heard of pathos, ethos, and logos. So pathos being really appealing to a listener's emotions, describing how you felt with words that pull at your heartstrings. Ethos being convincing the audience about your credibility and your character. And logos being through logic, using tangible evidence and forming really rational arguments with facts and statistics. It's also about engaging. It's about changing your pace and projection and your pitch. And most importantly, it's about telling a story. It's about being able to convey how you felt during a moment and the transformation that took place after you left that moment. And so when you really look at the different styles of communication, there's everything from verbal to non-verbal to written to visualization and graphs. And it's really interesting to see Gen Z start embracing many of these communication styles without even knowing it. Communication in the workplace is complex, but extremely important. It really allows for, a greater sense of understanding, connectivity, and an exchange of ideas. And it's funny because communication is one of the most important skills for the future, yet it's not something that's extensively taught in schools or university. The way we're taught to communicate is predominantly through written text, which most Gen Zers are great at anyway, with the rise of technology, social media, and a transition to digital communities, particularly during COVID. But when you look at communication, it really comes down to three main things. So you have the sender, the message, and the receiver. So first, the sender is the person who sort of encodes a message in a mixture of words and non-verbal cues, like my gesturing. Secondly, it's transmitted through a medium, whether that be through me speaking or even writing. And lastly, the receiver is the person who decodes it. The misunderstanding often happens in the last stage, if the receiver interprets the message differently to what was intended. So you can think of it almost as a big game of whispers. It's not just about what you say, but how you say it. It's tone, expression, volume. And so in the workplace, it's an interesting dynamic to really explore. How might we communicate better so that everyone's voices are not only heard, but actually understood from different perspectives? So there are a lot of different, scenarios where you might have to communicate, from professional settings like job interviews and networking, to simply introducing yourself at a party to friends. And so a good way to start sort of improving those communication skills is putting yourself in scenarios where you have to practice. It's as simple as that. So for example, if we talk about verbal communication in a professional setting, a simple thing that you can do is getting used to your own voice and practicing in front of a mirror. That might look like, before a job interview, asking yourself questions around what the company looks like, what the company's goals, vision, and mission looks like, and answering that based on your honest opinion and the research that you've done on that. Another great way to think about communication is get more involved in passion projects where you have to work with other people. And in that way, you get to explore, how do I navigate scenarios as a team? How do we look through conflict? How do we resolve issues? And how do we move forward together rather than individuals? And so I think the biggest tip is really thinking about, when I'm communicating with somebody, how can I learn how to even over-communicate? I think in a team setting, it's really important, because if you're running, say, like an international hackathon or summit or something like that, you really need to know what's going on at every stage of the journey. So there isn't really such thing as over-communication. And so a really good way to practice is by putting yourself in all of these different scenarios and see how you go. After all, it's a work in progress. So it's something always interesting to see Do I communicate better verbally, written, non-verbal, and sort of working on each of those things to present yourself in a better light and to keep improving yourself as a human being. I think with communication, it can also be around translating, how we perceive the world around us to another person. So creatives might like to look at using different mediums to communicate. And we see this with the rise of companies tapping into TikTok to make their brands relevant and interesting to Gen Z. And so I think there's a lot of scope for people to actually be creative and communicate, not just through by text or, in a verbal professional setting, but looking at how can I use media and comms to invoke emotion in another person and tell the story that I want to put forward about the way that I see my world. A really strong way that Gen Zers can communicate is through the use of technology and social media. And as you approach these businesses, they want to stay relevant to Gen Z. Many of them want to engage with young people, but just don't know how. So a really good way to further your own career is actually using that to your own strength and being able to communicate to the other person that you have this, unique advantage to communicate through social media, rather than seeing it as a downfall or as a negative thing where young people are always on their phones. You can think about, how can I present myself from that unique position of being a young person who wants them to tap into that market. And so I think as we continue practicing skills from social media and technology to our verbal skills, even in professional settings, there's a lot of different ways that we can think about how might we bring our own unique perspectives in front of the people who want to see them most, and how can we be our true authentic selves through communication.